welcome to the Biggie Bastards podcast, where we're going to talk about some good music so you know how to be cool like us and listen to all the good stuff. My
like
name
an
is,
80s radio DJ, I love it.
Yeah, I am an 80s radio DJ. That's my dream. Well, as you can already hear,
Were you born
I'm
in the
not
80s?
Yeah.
What,
I got a
89?
whole 6 months in the 80s.
Wow.
Fuck off.
Regular boy
Here we go
George.
again with the abuse on the age.
Well, I'm joined by Nick and Fran, as you've already heard from their abuse. Hi,
Deserved abuse.
gentlemen.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi.
Good. I'm excited to talk about some music, and I'm also very sleepy. So we'll see how this
And
goes.
hungover as well, apparently.
Just a little, just a
We're so
smidge.
professional. We're so professional. I mean, there's probably out of 41 episodes, we probably at least on 27, one of us have talked about how hungover we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I still
Yeah.
got the record, though, for the one where I was literally ready to cancel with 5 minutes to go because I thought I was just going to throw up all the way
Yeah.
through the podcast. That was,
Well, you
that was a high point.
soldiered on through,
I did. That's
and that
professionalism.
shows your professionalism.
Exactly.
And so, as we're being very professional, before I tell you the albums and playlists, I'm going to just say that if you really like what we've talked about so far, you should go to pickybees.com, because you can go and read some of the stuff that we've written, and probably what you want to actually read is what other people have written about music, and it is
Significantly
actually
better
genuinely
writers.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most of the articles start normally as well. There's not 10 paragraphs of people just talking bollocks.
Yep.
So
We just get on with it.
Yeah. And we have a fun Twitter as well. I'd say it's fun. And
Wasn't
we
fun
just finished a tournament about the UK number ones, and which we said Ghost Town by the Specials was number ones. Or we didn't say it, everyone else did. It was a
Yeah,
tournament. Everyone voted.
thank God it wasn't Human League who got to the semi-final. But anyway, let's move on from there.
I think the top 8 were all fantastic. It was good. Anyway, we have today. We're not talking about UK number ones. We're talking about 5 different albums and a playlist. And those albums are Nick Cave and Warren Ellis with Carnage, The Body with I've Seen All I Need to See, The Antlers with Green to Gold, Dry Cleaning with New Long Leg, and Dr Octagon with Dr Octagon Ecologist. Which
Say that
I'm
one more
going to have to
time.
say a couple more times, and I'm never going to be able to say it right. But yeah, you can read it when you Google
Dr.
it, and it'll
Octagonacologist.
come up.
I think I've got it nailed. Dr. Octagonacologist.
Yeah, you're
Well
a
done.
word person.
Thank you.
I also am going to be talking at the end about Bombay Bicycle Club, and we have a playlist which is available on Spotify, along with all of these, which you can also get through pickybees.com, our favourite place. So, to get us started, I'm going to ask Nick a question, and that question is, which album had the best moment in it?
Well, I'm going to be really, really kind to the two of you and give you the opportunity to get your blinkered kick-off against one of the albums over with and say that I think Eschatological Imperative by The Body is the best moment on any of these albums. Particularly at the very start of the song, there's this kind of super low-frequency wobbling kick drum. I think it's kick drum, which is such an intriguing sound. And to be honest, when I first heard the album, I really kind of debated whether or not things like in the opening song, A Lament, there's this point where it literally stops playing the music. Like it gates to the point where there is silence, cuts in and out. And I really wasn't sure if they'd gone too far in terms of making this completely unlistenable. I know what Fran will say on this, but for me, in the end, it was worth the sort of destabilizing nature of that experience. And the band is very like, there's a lot of other bands similar that I enjoy, like Sun O, Divide and Dissolve, who I wrote about on the website a few weeks ago. And they're really bands all about tone, like I've talked about so many times before. The thing that usually ruins metal, even sort of drone and death metal albums for me, usually is the vocals. But on this album, I think they were actually generally pretty well mixed. They were mixed kind of fairly back and kind of comfortably sitting in the track. If anything could be comfortable in an album as angry as this. So yeah, I think overall I really enjoyed the album. I think Tied Up and Locked In was probably the high point in terms of its unbelievable viciousness. It was an exhausting listen, but it was something I really was able to sink my teeth into. And yeah, I thought it was really great. And again, and I'll say it one more time, eschatological imperative, because I wasn't sure I'd be able to get that out.
I'm
was the best
impressed that you
part.
could.
So yeah. So now Fran's got to think of something else to back up, because he was obviously going to say that was his worst moment of the whole podcast, the whole playlist.
Shall I go then?
Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wasn't going to say it was my worst moment. To be honest,
Wow.
yeah, I kind of imagine you would both think you know how I feel about this album. And I'll start by saying, yeah, I couldn't listen to it all the time, and I certainly listened to it less than some of the other albums on the podcast. It's not really a nice, calming album to listen to when you're working from home. But in comparison to some similar albums we've covered here on the podcast, I actually really got into this. Got into it might be going far. Might be going a little bit far, but I
Finally
really
converge you.
got a bit of leeway with it, and I kind of felt like I could get my head around it. I think it felt successful in what it was aiming for me. I think it did a good job of what it wanted to do. I think it builds a really oppressive, urgent atmosphere really well. It's interesting you talk about the drums, because I think it's the percussion that makes this work for me. I think the percussion is really powerful, really overwhelming. That song that I'm not going to try and pronounce because you've just done it so well. So I don't want to ruin that for people.
Imperative.
I think that was, the highlight on the album for me. I think the rolling drums on that really ramp up the sort of feelings, and I can imagine it being extremely intense in a live setting. What it reminded me actually was of when me and you went to see the Swans, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I felt there was some similarities here with the Swans, but with the Swans it's light and shade. I think here it's pretty much entirely shade. But I think where it differs from something like, say, the Liturgy album that we covered here is that it doesn't feel chaotic, it feels purposeful. And I think it achieves its purpose pretty well. But yeah, in the long term, it's probably not an album I'm going to stick on again. But it was nice for me to sort of listen to an album like this and actually get something from it. Usually these are the albums that I just sort of skip and don't come back to. And that wasn't the case here. I mean, I couldn't listen to it every time I went through the playlist, but when I could get in the mood for it, I actually got quite a bit from it. So, yeah.
From that, I'm going to take that you become a massive drone noisecore fan. And from now on, the picks I'm going to make are going to be noise drone core.
That's definitely not the case. But it's interesting actually what you said about the vocals, because I was trying to pick up why the vocals didn't grate on me in the same way that they did on, say, the Liturgy album. And I think you're right that they're further back in the mix, aren't they? They're not quite as, they don't dominate in the same way. I kind of wish he'd done a bit more with his vocals and a bit more with what he was saying in the songs, because then I think maybe I could have really liked this album. But I was still pleased that I could get some enjoyment from it. Yeah. Matthew.
Cool. And disappointingly, I have quite a lot of the same words written down that Fran talked about in my notes. I actually have similar feelings. It does. It is obviously incredibly obscure and oblique, and again, its oppressiveness. But I found that actually a lot of the time when I listened to it, not always, but a lot of the time, it imbued me with a lot of energy. And so I actually got quite a lot from this. And I also thought it was pretty accessible for its genre. I've been playing a lot of BioShock recently, which is like this dystopian video game. And I've also been listening to a lot of soundtracks. I've been listening to John Carpenter's new album quite a lot, and even though they're quite different genres, the music that's in, say, BioShock or John Carpenter's music, it does feel like this could do well accompanying some of the harrowing moments of a game like that or a movie, and so it kind of slotted into that kind of vibe for me, in that I could put it on and it had this like sense of feeling it would give me, and it would help me while I'm working.
Okay.
the danger and the putting me on edge made me like like I said, it imbued me with energy while I worked.
For some reason, this is moving from like a nice amount of support for an album that I really like to just pissing me off now. You're breaking the mold here, both of you, and it's not acceptable. I can't take this.
Because you just want us to be contrary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the main thing for me, actually, that differs from you guys is I actually found the first few tracks harder to get into because they were more, I guess, disjointed. There was a lot more going on. And I actually, probably for better or worse, like that kind of soundtrack thing that I was like hooking onto, I found much easier to grab towards with the latter songs because they were a little bit less dynamic. They were a little bit more like I wouldn't say easy listening, but they were less challenging.
Yeah, you wouldn't say that. That would be inappropriate.
No. And so I guess I got the most from different set of songs to you. It sounds like you guys, but I definitely enjoyed its place.
Right. Fantastic.
Interesting.
Cool. Right, well, next up, we're going to be asking a very similar question, except a bit more negative. So, Fran, which album had the worst moment?
I think most of the worst moments on this playlist were on the same album, and that album was Dr Octagon by Dr Octagon, this month's classic. I had put in my notes that I wasn't going to try and pronounce the title, as we would have already heard Matt struggle with it, but it seems I'm really good at it and Matt's terrible at it. I'm going to keep saying that.
Well done.
Make the most of it.
I'm going to pick out the entire intro as the worst moment on this playlist because it's arguably the cringiest thing I've heard in a very, very long time. So when Matt picked this, I was immediately quite concerned about the album because, it's called Dr Octagon, and I knew it was Cool Keith.
What's it called again? Just what?
Dr Octagon.
Okay, nice.
So yeah, I was pretty concerned about what it was gonna focus on. And basically, the intro is a 1.5 minute skit, which reads like a terrible porn script, and basically confirms that Cool Keith just wanted to write a fantasy about him being a doctor so he could get wanked off by his nurses and patients. So yeah, it's pretty gross. The intro just talks about him exploding all over the walls and ends with the wonderfully, really clever line of "fuck my pussy, doctor," which is very clever. So yeah, it's pretty gross. It does feel like this uncomfortable element of the album just keeps returning again and again. So like the song called "A Visit to the Gynecologist," which I'm sure you all struggle to figure out what that's about. But again, it seems to be a skit about a male doctor pretending to be a woman so that he can touch up his patients. So that's lovely. And then there's the song "Girl, Let Me Touch You," which again, I'm not going to even go into that one really. Yeah.
I'm crying over here. This is amazing. This is a total. Yeah. Okay, carry on. Sorry.
But in a way, it's all a bit of a shame, really, that is so central to the album. Because if you take all that horrible disgustingness out of it, it's actually quite an enjoyable 90s hip-hop album in its sound. Like, there's some good tunes. His flow's pretty good. It's Cool Keith, so obviously we know his flow's pretty good. But it's got a fun sound. It's got an inviting sound. But when you really listen to it, it's just all too creepy and sex-pesty, and just was obviously written some fun, fucked up sex dream that he had and just wanted to turn to an album. So it's a massive, massive no from me in the end, thank you. And I'm not really pleased that you made me listen to it, Matt.
Matt, why don't you jump in and defend it? Because I'm sure you're going to.
Yeah, so that is definitely a sticking point. Let's because he does, yeah. Like the visit to the gynecologist, especially, is essentially him documenting a rape, which is it's yeah. There's the interstitials in this, and the thing weaving together the narrative is just fucked up and not cool. I don't think anybody would think that we were particularly condoning this or positive about this. But yeah, so I recommended we listen to this based on hearing I heard Blue Flowers while listening to. I think I was watching Silicon Valley, the TV show, and I heard Blue Flowers, and I thought this is a weird kind of cool song. And then I found out it was related to Cool Keith, and was like, oh, I haven't really listened to him, so let's suggest this. And it is, like, reading around, is like his most critically acclaimed solo project, and like I can see why. Like, in the music, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. It's also the first album for Dan the Automator, who did the production for the Gorillaz debut and a bunch of other stuff. I think his next album after this was Corner Shop, with the album with Brimful of Asher and stuff. So he's been all over the place.
Slightly less porny album second. So.
Yeah. Like he figured his shit out after this.
That album with Brimful of Asher and stuff. Name any of the other stuff? Any other song?
He did a primal. I don't know that album.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I just know it's the one with Brimful of Asher.
Exactly my point.
And I like the tone of the music, like the whole idea of, like, it feels like the future, but like the science fiction future that was envisaged in the late 80s, 90s, as opposed to what actually the future is. It's like hammy, noir-y, almost like Total Recall kind of vibe to it. And so, yeah, like, there's a lot I could say about, like, the music. He's obviously very good at what he does. The beats, I think, are interesting with the heavy synths and the samples that just match the tone that he's trying to hit. It's just the issue is the center of that tone is the narrative, which is not great. But yeah, I think I might still listen to Blue Flowers on its own, because I really like that song.
I can't pick out which one. This is the problem I had with the album, is because if I listen to it, and the first couple of times I listened to it, obviously the first time I played that intro, I was working. My girlfriend was in the next room working, and it just does sound like a porn film for the first minute and a half, and I was just like, in the middle of a session, like an online session at work. And yeah, I just had to quickly turn it off. But once I got past that and would just have it as background music, it does sound like a good album. It's just when you really get into it and spend time listening to it like we have, and you realise what is at its heart, it's just unlistenable to me. To be honest. But what about you, Nick? Did you love it?
Oh, actually, no. No. I thought, I mean, the things you said are true. His flow is solid. I actually thought musically it hadn't aged well, in the sense that it was very structurally basic, and it didn't. I wasn't interested in that personally. I kind of can't fault it, because that was the time, but it's not something I'd go back to, musically speaking. I thought, so I can sort of see the value of it in that respect, just musically. His flow is solid, as I say, but I kind of put down that the album seemed very silly. I mean, I think it is absolutely, Fran is dead right, that it is kind of nauseatingly wrong on so many points. It's also so childish. It was kind of annoying. It was like, it was kind of like it was being narrated by like an 11-year-old or something, you know?
Totally.
He's not a young man by this point, Cool Keith either.
So it was really childish, and that kind of pissed me off. So and all the little interstitial bits, like one of the ones I got to tell you, that doctor leaving a voicemail message was an example. All that stuff was cringy. So no, didn't like it, and I can see why musically it had some significance, but I won't be going back to it.
Yeah, it is quite interesting on the music side of it as well, though, because I think listening to it the first few times I heard it, and I was, musically it's quite interesting. It's a callback to some of the stuff I liked. I actually would have, when I was first hearing it, that it was maybe from the late 80s, early 90s, when actually it's a 1997 album. So I think the first few listens I had, I was like, this is an era of when hip hop was just getting, really mainstream and getting really interesting, and the beats were, but actually, in a way, the beats are dated even when they came out, I think. I think they are more 80s, early 90s than they are sort of late 90s. So I think even in that way, I mean, stuff like Dre was coming out, like 2001 and stuff was coming out a couple of years after that. So I think it does sound dated even when you actually think about when it came out in a way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
week.
I guess, yeah. Disappointing.
I wasn't really having a go at you, Matt. I know that you didn't choose it on purpose to put us through that.
Oh yeah. To be honest, I didn't put together the title with the implication, and I didn't look at the track list. So maybe if I'd done that, I would have screened it. But
I think now we've had a few occasions where one of us has like stayed the other. And the entire point is that it's blind playlist, so we don't know what we're going to get. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So, who knew?
Let's switch to something hopefully better. Nick, what was maybe your favourite album that we haven't covered so far?
We haven't talked about. I'll go with Carnage. I'll go with the Nick Cave. I thought it was extremely beautiful, consistently throughout the whole album. Very hypnotic, very consistent in its flow all the way through, sort of sumptuous. It was lyrically showing the mastery that he's established over many, many years. And, there were so many sort of moving aspects to it. So I did really enjoy it. I think it didn't really... On the downside, it didn't really move his work forward for me from the Ghosteen album, which absolutely blew me away. It didn't strike me as anything on there that I would sort of that I would prefer to Ghosteen, or that felt like he had progressed. And obviously, he's done God knows how many albums, so he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't need to progress at all. But I kind of had that hankering for something slightly more new, and this sounded like. This sounds more harsh than it's intended, but it sounded like a sort of B-side to Ghosteen, in a way. I think it also misses the rest of the band, even though Woz and him are great, and they've done so much, and they are, the centre of the Bad Seeds. I think it could do with a wider range of instrumentation overall. So for sort of a hardcore fan like me, it was definitely still enough. I'll go back to it. I really enjoyed it. And there's no question that it was really a great album on many levels. But I think it would have been nice to see something. This just still felt like an in-between album, and I think on that level it's perfectly okay. But if this was the next Nick Cave and Bad Seeds album, I would probably be a little bit disappointed versus Ghosteen. That's where I'd put it. What does anyone else think?
Cool. Fran.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, in all honesty, I've been struggling a little bit to listen to Nick Cave for a little while now. I've been a big fan for a long time, and Push the Sky Away in particular is up there with my favourite albums. And I was really, really into Skeleton Tree when it came out.
You never really got into Ghosteen at all, though, did you, from what I remember of our conversations?
Well, I'm about to sort of touch on that a little bit. Because I did find that I loved Skeleton Tree when it came out, and then I started to find it quite a difficult listen, and now I know it's a difficult listen, but in terms of its emotional weight and everything. But I started to find it difficult just in general to really have the same involvement with that album. I found I started to go off that a little bit, which did lead to me kind of ignoring Ghosteen a little bit when it came out. But when we put Carnage on this list, I thought I need to go and listen to Ghosteen a few times. I'm going to say I didn't really get into it particularly after a few listens. Maybe it just needs more time, but I just felt a bit
Ghosteen's
tired.
a way better album than Skeleton Tree, I think.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I definitely don't. But particularly, I think listening to the Mumford Carnage, it kind of embedded in me that I'm just a little bit done with this sound of Nick Cave, this current sound that he seems to be on. I was hoping with Carnage that he might, it's called Carnage. I was hoping we might see a bit of a switch up and that it might let loose a little bit. And I think that's kind of what you're saying a little bit there, anyway, Nick. That
you're looking for Grinder Man, and you get him Nick Cave on his own doing piano.
And it just felt a bit like this is now 3 albums that, Push the Sky Away, I think, was
and the piano album as well. He did
change.
last year, the live album we did.
Idiot Prayer. I kind of didn't listen to that either.
Oh, that was beautiful, but very similar again. You're right.
Yeah, but spending a month with this really just sort of embedded those feelings that I'm a little bit done at the minute. I mean, I can admire it. I think there is some real beauty there. I think he's a strong lyricist as always, but nothing makes me want to listen to this album. There was nothing that made me want to come back to it. It's all a bit too dirgy and flat for me. I think White Elephant is really interesting until it becomes very, very dramatic towards the end. I think Albuquerque is a very beautiful song, and it's definitely the standout. But then for me, it just merges into Lavender Field, Shattered Ground, and Balcony Man at the end. I just feel like the album just goes into this drifting, meandering ending that's, yeah, it's kind of beautiful, but it kills any of the interest that had sort of peaked earlier. And I think by the end of the album, it all just feels very samey and tired. And I just don't feel any need to listen to it again. And I just hope that we see something different from him, even though it is a beautiful album. Nick Cave makes beautiful music, but it's just a bit tired at the minute for me.
I would agree that Carnage, which is only the third track, is I think is the strongest track on it, the title track, and that's, you know, early. The first half of the album is better than the second half. But I think it's an interesting point you raise about the sort of looseness of it. I think in the last couple of albums he's developed a really interesting direction in terms of being so fluid, musically fluid across the beat and stuff with all the musicians he works with, that you want the songs sort of almost fall apart. And sometimes maybe they do actually fall apart, but in the case of the Ghosteen album, I think they still have a solid structure, but they just have this blurring of the edges there, which I find really, really riveting. But yeah, anyway, we can agree to disagree about that. But yeah, I see what you're saying. What do you think, Matt?
I've never really liked Nick Cave that much.
Like, that's not acceptable. That's going too far there. That's not acceptable. Sorry.
I've tried to like Nick Cave. I've listened to a lot of his albums, and I always like find a song or two that I like. Oh, this is cool. But I've never like. I know people are obsessive about him.
Not me though. I'm just a totally normal fan. I'm not obsessed at all. I know what you're talking about. The guy's just a regular musician. He's fine. Sorry.
You sound
the
like
fact that you won't let any of us finish a sentence while we're talking about him, Nick, is evidence that that's not true.
Yeah, okay,
I think we need to put you on
now.
the naughty step for 30 seconds.
The way you're talking sounds like you need your next fix.
I do. I'm going to play it in the background. We're continue recording this now.
I think it's not really a surprise, though. I don't think that it's not my really my bag, because he's very literary. His music is, as Nick would describe, probably it's not super chirpy, and as we're going to get into later with my introducing band, I like a lot of like very poppy and chirpy music.
Yeah, I've got to cross out the word chirpy out of all my references now. The rest of these notes.
Yeah.
Give me a minute.
And so this definitely isn't that. Like I do like some of the tone it sets at the beginning, where it's like dark and brooding. And I do think when I've listened in the past to him, where he's more dramatic, I often like it more. But yeah, it just descends into something that's pretty straightforward and not particularly engaging.
Can I ask if you like Grinderman? Have you tried Grinderman at all?
Yeah, I like Grinderman more. Yeah.
Okay, right.
And then I think Fran mentioned White Elephant White Elephant. And it ends in some like, it does get more dramatic, but it's this weird gospel fusion, and weird, I think there's a lot of people infusing gospel into their music at the moment, and a lot of people doing it really, really well, and this wasn't done well. It felt like an afterthought. Felt much closer to something like Blur's Tender than it did to anything that's really... Like, I like that song, but it does feel very cheesy.
You know what? It sounds very like Tender. I hadn't thought of that until you just said it, but it does.
Yeah.
I'm very similar to the end of Tender.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to meditate for a few seconds here, just to try and soothe myself before I say anything else. Deep breathing is working.
For me, I really like Blur's Tender, but it's very cheesy, and it's not. I wouldn't hold it up as like, this is high quality music making. This is like a fun moment, and considering where music's been going, I think music quality just keeps rising and rising, and this is just not. It feels tokenistic adding it, so I'm just like, meh. It was a bit of a switch off for me. But yeah,
I feel like you might have definitely risking some shit coming back at us from listeners about, because people love Nick Cave.
I'm not associated with either of these two comments. God. Yeah, so just don't give me any shit.
I don't really care, and Morrissey sucks as well. We'll just throw that out.
That we can agree on. I'll go further with that and say Morrissey always sucked. I never liked Morrissey. Okay, so just from day one.
Who else
come at me?
I fucking
Noel
hate
Gallagher?
the Beatles. Carry on.
God.
Top 10 most hated acts we can list right now. Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Matt.
it's just quiet, right? It's just quiet. It's just too quiet as of an album.
I mean, yeah. I know you've not all been a fan particularly, but when I heard it was called Carnage, I know that it's silly just to think an album's called Carnage and maybe I'm going to get, but I was like, songs like Red Right Hand and Stagger Lee and stuff from Nick Cave's back catalogue, I was like, am I going to get some of that back? Even though I've loved some of the slower stuff and I think the music that he's done recently has been really valuable in like, it's been because of stuff that's going on in his life, and I think it's really important, but also I just kind of I'd love to see him sort of kick off again. When me and you went to see him, Nick, like the gig was fantastic.
Oh my God, that was a great gig. Yeah.
And the slow moments were great, but what was great about that gig was that he would be at the piano doing something beautiful 1 second, and then he'd be throwing himself around the stage, and the crowd would be really going for it. And I think I just missed that from him at the minute in his career. I just think I really want his next album to really sort of let go a little bit, but I'm not sure that it will.
Yeah, I think especially Carnage is not just Carnage; it's written in all caps. So that's like that's an angry kind of carnage as opposed to
casual
the world
carnage.
is. Well, like as in
Relaxed
I'm
carnage.
breaking apart and broken as a person kind of carnage.
Yeah.
Right.
That's yeah.
I mean, I think I understand
that's
where the
reading
Carnage
too
title
much
came
into it.
from. Getting to the end, I think the songs like White Elephant, which are kind of around the sort of, the whole statue issue of the last few years and stuff like that. I think Carnage, I do get why he's calling it Carnage, but it's certainly not Carnage to listen to in any way.
No.
But, yeah.
Right, you should just really swap the body with Carnage, shouldn't it, as titles, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen all I want to see.
Do you know what? I've seen all that I need to see would be a great title for this Nick Cave album.
And that
it feels like you've seen all you need to see.
That's the best album. The title of the album is amazing. I've seen all I want to see.
Let's just do that. Let's just call that. I'll ring Spotify.
I'll ring Spotify.
We've made an executive decision.
Yeah.
That would work a lot better.
Should we move on?
Right.
Yeah.
Let's move on. I've had enough of Nick Cave. So, Fran, why don't you tell us about either Antlers or Dry Cleaning? Your choice.
Do you want to know about an album I liked, or do you want to know about an album I didn't like?
Just pick an album and talk about it.
Yeah.
That's how this podcast works.
Oh, fucking hell. Right, the next one I can see is Antlers, so I'll go with that. Okay, so I was a big fan of Antlers' 2009 album, Hospice, as many people were. It was massive at the time. But somehow I missed that they'd released 2 albums in between that one and this. So when I picked Green to Gold for this list, part of the reason was I was really keen to cover their comeback album after 12 years, but it's not their comeback album after 12 years. I got that totally wrong. I just missed 2 albums. But even though I got that wrong, I still think the comparison between that album and this one is quite an interesting one. So I loved Hospice because it felt like this sort of post-rock, folk rock album that uses like these bursts of sound and Peter Silverman's vocals to really represent the angst and anxiety of the songs. It was all, the album was all about trauma. It was about falling in love with somebody who's dying, and it was like this metaphor for toxic relationships. It was really sort of fascinating in that respect. And I think the fear and the trauma that were sort of represented by the bursts into the calm moments of the song were amazing, really interesting. And I think Green to Gold, the latest album, is also really fascinating in the way it uses its music to convey emotion. It's a much calmer sounding album right from the start. I think the opening song Straw Flower, the instrumental opener, it's so peaceful, it's so meditative, it's a really gorgeous little piece of music. And then it goes into the second song, Wheels Roll Home, and I think his voice, which obviously I missed 2 albums, so I don't know what happened in between, but it almost feels like a different person. He just feels so smooth and so soothing and so gentle. And this kind of continues across the album. It feels like a record that's been written by someone who's sort of shed all that anxiety. And for that reason, it just feels like a really comforting, inviting album to me. I think it's really lush. There's loads of layers. It's really well produced. I think I do question sometimes whether such a calm and comforting album can kind of avoid being a bit boring at times, because it does stay on a certain level, I think, for a lot of the album. But I think for me, it comes down to mood with this album. I think if you listen to it at the right time, it's perfect. And I think that it passed me by a little bit at first, and the more I listened to it, the more I sort of found it really involving. I think there's still some of the trademark anxiety in the lyrics of songs like Stubborn Man and It Is What It Is. But the good thing about this album, I think, and I don't often say this, but is you can zone out from his words and just enjoy his voice as an instrument. It just melds really well. And yeah, the last thing I wanted to say about this, and this is totally nothing to do with anything I've just said, but I just wanted to get this point across, is I think that this is the album that Fleet Foxes were absolutely desperate to make with that album they made last year that we featured on our best of last year. I think they were, I think they would kill to make an album like this, and it does everything they were aiming for, but just so much more effectively. And I just think, just because I hated the Fleet Foxes album, I wanted to get that point in. But that's me on Antlers. I liked it a lot, is my main point. What about you, Matt? I feel like you keep going last.
Yeah, go for it, Matt.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'll jump in. And so similarly, I remember listening to Hospice like a decade ago, but and they always seemed like a very gentle band. But at the time, I always preferred something like, for this like soaring indie kind of indie folk, indie rock, I always preferred something like Grizzly Bear as opposed to this, because it just had a little bit more going on. And I still kind of feel the same. I can't see the growth as much as you can. It is still like, this is one of the most pretty sounding albums I've listened to in a long time. It sounds very like rich and just very gentle. It's like the way they're playing their instruments, it almost feels like they're allergic to them or something. They just want to touch them for the briefest amounts of time.
Wow.
And it all feels very light and delicate, and like they barely want to intrude on you the entire time. And so
no, I think I like that sentence though. That makes sense. It did feel like that sometimes, but sorry, carry on.
Yeah. No. I think I was gonna agree with you really, because it did require a specific mindset, and so it felt almost like because of the way it felt like a lullaby, and so it was very much perfect, like wind down music. Like, I've had a tough day, I'll put this on, or I'm still quite awake, so I'll put it on while I'm doing the dishes before I go to bed. That kind of vibe for me. But there wasn't many other times where I actually was like, oh, I really want to listen to some music.
An album to do the washing up to. Now that is kicking it, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah,
Radical.
exactly. So it's that it doesn't really cross that boundary from like something that's almost, I'm not going to say, I don't want to say easy listening, but
You keep saying it today.
It's twice today.
what else did I say was easy listening?
You said that the body was easy listening.
The body was easy listening.
Well, I said it wasn't easy listening, but it was, okay. But,
You failed, basically.
Yeah.
I think easy listening's fine, though. It doesn't have to be like, I wouldn't sit there and... Easy listening has become this sort of derogatory thing, but it is an easy listening album in a way, and that's kind of okay sometimes for an album to be easy to listen to. It's an album for me, I think, that's easy to listen to on a level, and then if you delve in, there is more to it than that, which I think for me is something I really like in music. But I do know what you mean, and also I do think you do need albums to do the washing up to, so I'm also going to say that's fine.
I think you said what I was going to say in a much more eloquent way of just like, it's what it needed to be, and it filled a role. It's not going to be my favourite album of the year, but that's fine.
Nobody's going to get anything more eloquent than the thing about not being allergic to their instruments, though. Matt, I just want to say, you get the award today. Well done.
Oh, thanks.
I'm on my up now, yeah? You ready?
You are.
Okay.
Go for it.
So there's been lots of times this has happened before where we've had some interesting playlist juxtapositions, and to have the body run right before the Antlers was a pretty hard example of that. Possibly the most extreme one we've had. And I know that makes it very tough, since I like the body so much, for me to adjust to the Antlers as being something that was meant to be a kind of very mellow, almost hypnotic kind of pace. But but the only word that struck me when I was thinking it through was that this album is kind of watery. It's so unbelievably, it's just a lullaby of an album. And I think Matt, as I said, hit the nail on the head. There's the guitars, for example, are played so lightly as to hardly exist. I mean, in Green to Gold in particular, the title track, they're just not even there. It's just give me something. So a lot of the album is very nice. Like Solstice, for example, I thought was a nice track. But I just overall found it so, and I found the vocals, the kind of whimsy of the vocals, also very soporific. So I was not a fan. And I'll just mention I've not been a fan. I've never heard of them before, honestly. So I wasn't familiar with the previous stuff. Maybe it's better than this. But this was, even allowing for the fact that it was going up against the body right before it, just going too far down that road of just being music to fall asleep to.
No, you're totally wrong about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nonsense.
Sorry. Not that sorry, really.
It's the way. It's just yeah. Right. Well, I'll start us off with dry cleaning then, with New Long Leg.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I was super excited when we said we're going to do this because there was a ton of hype around it, and then I hadn't listened to any of it or heard any of the songs. And normally I've heard like a single for something that's like hyped so much, and I held off. And I was very excited with the opener, like the way it kicks in, the like deadpan delivery, and it like bounces around, and the lyrics are very fun. There's some very fun imagery, but it's the best track on the album. And subsequent to that, I think I like the second track as well, but then it kind of settled into a very like consistent pattern, the same deadpan delivery, the same minimal music, and like I really do like the monotone sing, like kind of talk singing, but when the music is also so monotone, it just didn't have that much diversity to the album as a whole. Like I like it as a way to give the voice more weight by giving it that space, but it just musically just didn't have that much more to like just add some like interests or twists as you went through like 40 minutes or however long the album was. So yeah, like I feel like if you're going to go for something that's a little off kilter, if everything is off kilter, then like you don't notice it as much, and it doesn't become special or have novelty or charm anymore. So I was disappointed. I'll still listen to the opening tracks, but it's not an album that I'm going to listen to, I don't think.
Okay, do you want to go?
Who wants to jump in?
I will.
Fran?
I will.
You go.
Yeah, overall I enjoyed the album, and I thought the dry in dry cleaning was obviously intentional. The sort of calm, hilarious, dry stories that the singer tells. And that reminded me a little bit of a band that I really love, Art Brut. But
Everything reminds you of Art Brut. Just want to put that in there.
Yeah,
I'm sure that comes up once an episode.
Exactly right, yeah, so true.
Once an episode, Art Brut comes up, I'm sure.
Yeah, so it reminded me of that, except it was a lot less funny, a lot less interesting, a lot less energetic, but broadly speaking, attempting the same kind of thing. I thought there were several songs on it that were high points. I thought Leafy was probably the sort of most amusing song, and Her Hippo is probably my personal favourite because musically it sounded kind of like that 80s guitar indie band energy. I think there is a but though, like there was for Matt, which is I think there's been a hell of a lot of buzz around this band, and everyone's going off the fucking charts on it. So if I'm right about that, I think it doesn't set the world on fire to me. It's fine. It's entertaining. It doesn't really move me, and it doesn't really engage me to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm going to stick dry cleaning on. That sounds great. I'm not really hooked to that level. So yeah, I think it was a bit disappointing. But I'm glad it was on the list. I'm glad I got to hear it since everyone's talking about it as like the album of the year and whatever. I think it was just good, not great. Fran?
Yeah, well, like Matt, I was very excited. there's been so much hype, so many people rave about it. It supposedly sits in a genre that I'm generally pretty excited about at the minute. I think there's a lot of good stuff coming out. I heard Scratchyard Lanyard, which is the opening track, and it never really, it didn't grab me totally when I first heard it, but I did feel like it would probably be the kind of thing that would grow on me. But after a month with this album, I'm just waiting for any of it to grab me in any way. It just doesn't at all. I think musically it has some interesting-ish moments, like a few interesting bits of guitar. The guitarist doesn't always feel like he fits with the band, and that's probably the most interesting thing about it. But there's nothing that particularly gets me excited at any point in this album. And when it comes to the vocal delivery, well, she sounds bored as fuck all the way through. Yeah. So I don't see how I'm expected to ever be anything other than bored as fuck as well. Like, I assume this is supposed to be this part of the appeal here, this sort of disaffected, look at me, I'm so cool vibe. But it just feels like someone who doesn't give a shit, so I'm not left giving a shit. One of the most amazing things that I've read in a lot of the reviews and a lot of the stuff out there is how lyrically it's so inventive and so interesting. It just feels like an album set up to make the band seem like they're really the coolest thing on the planet, and it bores me to tears. I think it's very Britpop. It's very Britpop. It feels like it feels like an amalgamation of like all these bands that were out in the middle of the 90s, like Sleeper and a bit of Pulp and a bit of all these people who just like to. Yeah. I don't know. It's I don't know why it's so big and it's so interesting to people.
It reminds me of a band. When you say that, it's good. It reminds me of a band called Menswear. Do you remember that band Menswear from?
I do remember Menswear,
they were definitely like third division players in that scene, gotta say.
But they were like, there was people out there hyping them to hell.
Yeah. They were on the NME, covered the NME for like a year.
Yeah. And I feel like maybe that's what's happening with dry cleaning. But then I know people love it, and I do feel like when we come to do our Mercury episode, there's going to be a few of us very disappointed about the Mercury winner this year, because I feel like this might be it.
Yeah, I can believe that.
But yeah, I don't have a lot else to say than that. It was a big disappointment because the hype I'd been seeing, I was excited, and I do feel like after quite a lot of really exciting sort of guitar post-punky music for a while, it has died off a little bit this year. So I was hoping the Shame album's the only one this year that I've really got into, and I was kind of hoping this would be the next one, and it just wasn't. I just didn't like it.
Yeah, it doesn't lay a glove to the Shame album.
No, it doesn't, and it's so that's me on that one really. But I'm surprised. I mean, I'm interested actually that you know, Nick, I know you got some enjoyment out of it, but I'm interested because I kind of thought I must be getting something wrong here from everything that I've seen. I thought I must be missing something, but it
You're
looking
for validation from me, basically.
No,
I define what you think is cool. Is that what you're saying?
Quite interested to hear that the three of us were not. No one was blown away by it. I expected someone to be. But hey, here we are.
We've had a remarkable amount of consensus this month.
Yeah,
it's starting to worry me slightly.
Yeah. Bit of Antlers disagreement, bit of Nick Cave disagreement, but
but it's not. There's no one who loves something and someone hates it.
I mean, I love do I love the Antlers? I like the Antlers a lot. Nick doesn't like it at all. So
yeah. Well, I don't know. Yeah, this month for me was maybe the weakest in a very long time. I found it quite funny when my first playthrough. I was like, these picks are so quintessentially Nick and so quintessentially Fran, because we have like some indie folk, some post punk for Fran, and then we have some like Nick Cave and some metal. Yeah, but that isn't to speak to the quality. It's just more the genre. The quality, I don't think any of them were particularly stellar examples of their genre.
In that sense, the consensus is quite refreshing, because I was ready to be quite bored by the fact that everyone was going to kick off about the body being shit and everyone was going to talk about dry cleaning being amazing, of the two of you. So I'm quite pleased that we had some common ground there, because it sort of broke the sort of tracks we've been on of just like, I like every noisecore album and drone album, and you like every folk album kind of thing.
Was probably my second favourite.
Which was?
The body was probably my second favourite album after the Antlers.
Okay.
And I probably will never go back to the body again, so that shows you like where this playlist sat for me. But
you should put those two on a playlist of their own, just mix them. That'd be fucking mint. Yeah. What a change!
Oh God. You want to cry for 1 second, and then you want to cry in a different way the next second.
Yeah, exactly. So true. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Right. Well, that's No good. We'll skip this month.
I thought this. No, I don't agree though. I thought Carnage and Body was good, and Dry Cleaning was okay. So I got some things out of it, and we've had worse episodes. But yeah.
Yeah, it was never a playlist I wanted to stick on. I did struggle to I had to force myself to listen to this playlist a lot more than I do usually. I think part of that was I've been listening to a lot of good new releases, so it was kind of, do I want to go and listen to this album I'm really enjoying, or do I want to go and listen to Cool Keith talk about getting wanked off?
Could you not say that again, please? Could you just never say that again?
Sorry.
Thanks.
God. Cool. Well, there was definitely one good part of the playlist, right?
The Antlers.
The Bombay Bicycle Club.
Oh, right, okay. The BBC.
Yeah, BBC. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. So for me, they remind me a lot of uni. And I remember trying a little bit to convince Fran at the time to listen to them. But I could also tell that he wasn't that interested pretty early on. But I've just thought I'd have another go at inflicting them on him.
A lot's changed since then, mate. So you never know.
A lot's changed, and they've also changed as well a little bit, and had a little bit more diversity to them. So I thought maybe, but they definitely they came around at the time of landfill indie, right? And you can see where they could fit within that landscape. But I think when you compare to some of their contemporaries that they were coming out at the same time as, like Young Knives, The Holloways, Cajun Dance Party, they were a step above. They were more in line with bands like Metronomy, who've actually lasted. Can I just ask one question?
Is it about Cajun Dance Party? That's what I was going to ask as well.
Did you just make a band up?
Yeah, you made up. He was in it.
They were actually very fun.
Trying to pitch it.
Never heard of them.
They were very fun.
Terrible name.
That's your
Add
next.
to the list of terribly named bands that Matt likes.
That's your homework. You need to listen to one of the Occasion Dance Party song. I'll send you one after this.
Yeah,
it's very much.
But they carry a lot of the trademarks of the music at the time. I think the choppy guitars, the way the songs kind of ebb and flow in a very not surprising way, but there's very slower parts, and then it gets quite aggressive at times. There's a lot of repetition, a lot of backing vocals. But like I said, I think they do it better than most other people. The hooks are catchier. I find the lyrical focal point that they put forward often resonates more. It has more substance. Because I think they often find a single line, and then they'll repeat that a lot. But that line often speaks a lot to me, at least. Maybe not to you guys, but I often really like that focal point that they come up with. I think his voice is really interesting. It's really distinct. I know for a fact that a lot of people hate his voice, so I'm curious to see where you guys land on that. I think that is what you didn't used to like, Fran, about them.
You are so defensive on this band, Matt. Wow, you are just ready for us to kick the shit out of it.
I
was with the Body, I suppose.
Yeah, but I think it adds. I think the voice adds to the distinction of them. It adds to the uniqueness of their sound, which is hard to have when you are coming from a genre and a time where it was the floodgates were open on your genre. And I think one of the ways they tried to get around that as well is they released this first album, which was a massive success. It was very canonical indie rock, and then to follow that up, they released an entirely acoustic album, which was Flaws, and it's I think an astonishing and beautiful album because it came out around the same time as the folk movement was also starting to kick off as well. And they played a big role in that as being one of the most known bands who were pushing folk. And it won, it didn't win, but it was nominated for the Ivor Novello, so it wasn't just me who liked it.
Also a Mercury nomination as well at some point.
Yeah, the first album got a Mercury nomination. So it was critically rated, obviously. And I think really that second album showed their range as songwriters. They weren't just a bunch of kids with electric guitars. They could actually write genuine songs. And since then, they've kind of followed the trends. They've trended a little away from guitars. They have some more electronic drums, synths, and samples, and an overall kind of hazier sound to them. But I don't think that's done them a disservice, because they've also maintained their unique sound. Something it always sounds like one of their songs. And then another important part, I think, is for some of the tracks, you might notice a female vocalist, and that is Lucy Rose, and that's how she broke out as someone who helped them record from, I think, their second album, maybe their third album as well, added an extra dimension to them, and then she made her name and was able to go solo. But yeah, overall, I just think they're a really good example of indie rock, and some of their songs are some of my favorites. Like Always Like This it's very cheesy, it's very boppy, chirpy, as Nick would say, but it is a song I've listened to thousands of times, and I can always put on and it'll make me smile. So yeah.
So I mean, it goes without saying.
Who wants to talk first?
It goes without saying that we both hated it. So who do you want us to slate first? Who do you want us to kick off about it? I mean,
I don't. Who do you reckon hates it the most?
Let's go to Nick first. Let's go to Nick first.
The only thing I hate about this band is its name. I actually really was glad that I was forced to get past the name. I've heard a lot about them in the past, and I put it off because I didn't like the name. But it really was actually quite enjoyable, and I really got into a lot of it. I think the variety of the pacing was good. There was lots of instrumentation changes, and you mentioned that acoustic album, which was clearly a change of direction for them. I think it was a little bit. I mean, I know it's a precursor, but it was a little bit in the like everything school of song construction for me.
Yeah,
it's a band who I love. I know they're younger. But yeah, so in that sense, I got into it on that basis as well. So I really enjoyed it. There were some moments, in fact, that it sounded actually almost heavy. You know, there were some moments when there was some like bit of driving bass and stuff. You know, it kind of gave it a good amount of range, which was really, really interesting to me. So I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I think it wasn't flawless. There were a couple of tracks. Ivy and Gold was one I wrote down, and Lights Out, Words Gone, which I found a little bit irritating. I think maybe it's because they're a bit too chirpy. Yeah, that was literally the last word I wrote on the notes was chirpy, and you hadn't even said it yet. So, yeah, other than that, though, no, I did enjoy it, and I'm glad I got through it. I'm glad I got to hear it. So, yeah, so thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, so it's interesting that you talked about uni and about trying to get me into this band, because the first kind of thing I've written down was I was just really surprised when I stuck this playlist on about how much of it I knew, particularly the early stuff, because I've seen Bombay Bicycle Club on shitloads of festival lineups, headlining, and I've heard the name a lot, but I felt like they were a band that had totally passed me by, but they must have seeped in somehow. And
through the walls.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I've written.
I used to play it a lot.
Yeah, well, exactly what I've written is I must have heard it through the walls when we lived together.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't like it particularly then, because I think part of what maybe, you know, my tastes have changed a lot over the years. Oasis was still my favourite band when I started uni, so I'm a long way away from that now. But yeah, what also interested me, I suppose, about this playlist was how they are a more varied and changeable band than I kind of had them down for. I think, although I really recognise those opening songs and never probably they didn't stick with me before, I like those songs. I don't love them. Always Like This is very good, but I don't think it stands out above some of the contemporaries. What they remind me of a little bit in those early ones are a band that me and you really did get into together, Matt, which was the Maccabees, a band that we listened to a lot, and they do remind me of them in that early stuff, which was nice. But then they transition into You Already Know, which is a song with one of my favourite artists, Catherine Williams, who I really love. I was really surprised to see her pop up. And that started a run in the playlist of songs that I was really, really into. I particularly enjoyed the 3 songs from the album Flaws, and I'll be checking that album out in full. I particularly like the title song. This probably isn't that surprising, because this is when they become a bit more folky, so it makes sense that that's where I'd get into them. And then I enjoy some of the stuff as we go on. But I would say you've mentioned the repetition, and that is something that does grate on me a little bit as we get further into the playlist. I feel there are certain songs where there's just too much repetition for me. I struggle with how many times he says, "Can you bag me up?" on how can you swallow so much sleep. He just says it. He must say it 300,000 times. But it is interesting to me that it ties in with a lot of discussions we've had about our tastes on this podcast. That a lot of the bands that you've featured on this, why I love Metronomy, LCD Sound System, and they use a lot of repetition, and that's that's not a bad thing necessarily. But I suppose it's that thing of you always talk about that what grabs you most about music in the first instance is the beats and the catchy elements and stuff like that. Whereas for me, it's often lyrics. So that's interesting to me. But other than that slight issue with the repetition, there's nothing bad on this playlist. For me, it felt like a bit of a sandwich, really. It was some stuff that's good but not great on either side, and then a really lovely bit of filling in the middle. So I was glad I got to listen to it. And
good. I just need that repetition just to get it in my head.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the repetition's too much, It's just, it feels a bit like they've run out of ideas and they only know 8 words. But but it was only on a few occasions, and generally they're a much more interesting band than I had them down for. I'm trying to think of the kind of bands I had in my head who I thought they would probably like, but I can't. The ones that just stick around. The Strokes would be an example. A band that just seems to stick around, and I don't get why, because they never do anything different. But this band do different things, and they keep doing different things, and I like that about them. But yeah, Flaws is the stuff that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I thought that Flaws would be the catch point for you.
Yeah,
I'm glad you both got. Yeah, I'm glad you both got something from it.
Absolutely.
That went better than I thought it would.
I'm getting that impression.
Yeah, we could tell. Jesus, man.
But yeah, I have noticed that I especially from this, from a decade or more ago, I just obsessed with bands that just would say the same thing over and over and over again.
It's interesting. It's interesting because it's something that I find quite. Although I know Nick's probably thinking about me liking the Porridge Radio album while I'm saying this.
I was going to bring it up. I was going to go back there.
But in general, repetition is something that I don't do very well with, and I find a little bit irritating. So it's quite interesting to me that I think that's at least 3 people you've featured now who do tend to use repetition a lot, and it's quite interesting. What do you think it is? Why do you think repetition does it for you?
It's because I'm a simple boy, and it's all about quality, not quantity.
But it is quantity.
Why not have
quantity is exactly what you're getting.
2 or 3 lines that are really good that you don't need any more than that.
The song should be 15 seconds long by that logic, though.
All right, and
say the one line once and then you're out of there.
Yeah, I'm not slagging Bombay Bicycle, and I don't want to get into a point where I am slagging them off. But when you're talking about quality, can you bag me up? Is a line that he repeats all the way through. How can you swallow so much sleep?
Yeah.
What's the quality in that line?
Yeah, well, that's not a good point. Yeah. That's not one we should focus on.
Hey, you put it on the playlist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Fair game. Yeah. All right.
In general, cool. I was impressed, so I won't start slagging them off because there's no need.
Yeah, and their name is terrible.
If I went to a festival now and they were on, I would go and see them. In the past, I've been at festivals where they've been and I haven't gone and seen them. So you've done your job there, I suppose.
They're also very good live, and a very, very, very good live act. So you've done yourself a disservice in the past.
Yeah, I think they were clashing with PJ Harvey went out. So.
Well, okay, I get it. I get it.
Fair enough.
Right.
Great.
Should we get out of here?
Yeah.
So next time round, we have a bunch of new albums. My picks for next time around are the new Tony Allen release with There Is No End and the Squid album Bright Green Field.
Please be better than Dry Cleaning Squid.
Yeah.
I've gone with McKinley Dixon, For My Mama and Anyone Who Looked Like Her, and Porter Robinson's Nurture.
And I will be choosing the classic, which is Mini Ripperton's Perfect Angel. And my Why I Love, I will be covering a British folk artist called John Smith. I feel like after doing Bowie and a few other big names, I should probably go back to someone who's not quite as well known. So yeah, I'll be covering John Smith.
Awesome.
Great.
Cool.
Check out pickiebees.com. I'll do a list.
Don't forget all our social channels, like our Facebook. Our Facebook's flying. I went on the website the other day. The widget is still on the website, so we just totally blank because they locked us out.
Yeah, don't look for our Facebook, but do look for our Twitter @PickieBastards.
Right.
Great.
See everyone next time.
See you soon.
Bye.
See ya.